Square One DSM is an initiative of the Greater Des Moines Partnership. Since 2007, Square One DSM has been connecting entrepreneurial needs with qualified resources as well as providing guided professional and business direction. Square One DSM helps entrepreneurs maximize their successes by helping them navigate resources, strengthen knowledge, improve skills, form strategic alliances, and secure proper capitalization. To find out more about Square One DSM, visit squareonedsm.com.
Well, let's get started. Thank you all for coming. I'm Mike Caldwell. I work for the Greater Des Moines Partnership, and I run all the entrepreneurial activities for the partnership, and been doing that since 2007. I'm also the co-manager of Plains Angels, which is an angel investor forum that runs both in central Iowa and a little bit in eastern Iowa. So welcome. I am sorry for the crowded conditions. That's the bad news. The good news is this is our last meeting in this building. For those of you who are familiar with the Greater Des Moines Partnership, our building was damaged in the fire when Yonkers was destroyed, and we are moving into our new home back in the partnership at the end of December. And I got to see the brand new meeting rooms, and they are unbelievably nice. So the next one of these meetings is going to be in this really cool room with all brand new AV and sound system, everything. It's just wonderful. So I am sorry for the crowded conditions, but I do thank you for coming. I do these events monthly. We do take December off, so there will not be an event in December. We will have an event in January, and for any of you that have signed up in the past, you'll get an email. Meg Fisher, who some of you may know, she owns Lincoln and Lexi over in West Des Moines, which is a kids clothing store, is doing something national. She's starting to get bigger. And she's got a really interesting story, because I think she did it straight out of college, if I remember right. Kind of one of those, just has a lot of determination. So she's done something very, very cool with the store, but she's doing something even cooler down the road. So she's going to join us in January. Mike Ferrari with Social Money, which is probably one of the most successful startups in Iowa, in my opinion. He doesn't get as much attention as some of the other startups. I don't think anybody can master the Dwala PR any better, but Social Money is doing fantastic, and Mike's going to talk a little bit in February about what's going on with that. And from there, I'm not sure what the calendar looks like. So, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Caven, who's joining us today. When did I first meet you? About a year ago? 9 months ago?
Yeah, it was probably February.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'm not a person who sews, but my grandmother was one of those amazing seamstresses that could make anything from anything. And I think she got through the Depression making, if I remember right, the story is my mom and her sister got to school in junior high where you had to change for gym and found out all the other girls didn't wear flour sack underwear. Seriously? She sewed everything. Wow, yeah. So that was when they got store-bought underwear, because it was like, not going to do that. I can't imagine. But she's done something incredible, and if I can just kind of describe it as a front end, because it's pretty neat. So you have this old, very dated, traditional way of doing things. A sewing pattern is this piece of paper, it's transparent, it's got all these lines for sizes on it, and that's what's sold in fabric stores. And then you have this new world of online patterns that took off on the net, like so many things do, where people are creating patterns in PDF form and selling them to other people. But it was a many-to-many market. And without saying too much about it, because we'll get into it a little bit more, she's created the, if you will, the Etsy marketplace for digital patterns, which is really pretty cool. And she's now got 14,000 registered users already. Yeah. So it's taken off. What's even cooler is very few, I don't think anybody's really figured out how to hook e-commerce to a bricks and mortar store. And she's created a way for a bricks and mortar store to represent the patterns that are online and get payment when somebody buys one based on going into a store. So you can go into a fabric store, and we'll talk a little bit more about where, it's coming up very soon. Go to a fabric store, buy fabric, pick up a card for the pattern, go home and buy the pattern digitally and receive it as a download, and that store gets compensated. So connecting an e-commerce market to thousands of fabric stores, which I think is phenomenal. So, first question is going to be based on this information. You won
Easy one, please.
Dream Big Grow Here. You won the Venture School Pitch Competition. You won the most money in the history of Invest in She, as far as I know. You won the John Papa John Venture Competition. You won the Innovate Her Competition. What else?
That's enough.
That's all?
That's really good.
So how the hell do you win every competition you walk into?
Oh, I don't
She was
win.
pitching at the John Papa John one, and a good friend of mine was pitching against her. And I leaned over and I said, Julie, this is a fight for second. You are so done. The minute you walked up there, I said, you are so done. How did you do it?
Very nice.
Where did you learn to pitch?
Where did I learn to pitch? I just pitch a lot, obviously, and every time you refine it.
Yeah.
And you hear different questions and you get a little bit better and you answer the questions better proactively in your next pitch. And so it's just been building on top of
You're being
every
really
pitch.
modest.
Well, no, and
You're
I
one of the most
enjoy
natural pitch people I've ever seen.
Well,
so.
thank you. I enjoy pitching. I think it's really fun. I love telling people about sewing, and nobody thinks sewing is cool at first when I start talking about it. And I love seeing the change where people, the light bulb goes off and they go, hey, there is something to this.
Yeah.
So I like that.
So take 5 minutes and explain, kind of give them your 5-minute pitch of the company. I kind of set it up,
Yeah.
but please tell them about how you got here and what it is.
Sure. So Upcraft Club, I mean, you explained it very well. It's an e-commerce marketplace to sell sewing patterns. And I have my visuals here because I think it's easier. So sewing patterns have looked like this. You know, it's a paper sewing pattern. If you've seen these probably around. They have been the industry standard for 150 years. They haven't changed really in that amount of time. They're pretty much the same as they always have been. And there's a lot of good things about patterns in general and these, but there's also a lot of limitations. And one of the major limitations is that a beginning sewer cannot pick this up and just sew something from it. They assume that you already know what you're doing. And most people buying a sewing machine today do not already know exactly what they're doing. Or they want to learn a new technique, and these patterns don't teach them that. They assume you know how to do it. And so what has happened over the last couple of years is these patterns have gone digital. And I brought an example of one of the patterns that I have written. And now they're on iPads and they just look totally different. You can have these beautiful color images embedded in them. You can have videos that you link to. So if you want to learn a new step, you can watch it step by step through YouTube or through a video that your pattern links to. And you literally can teach someone to sew without being with them. And there are indie pattern designers all over the world that are creating amazing designs. And what's great about them is you can even email them and ask them how to sew something if you're trying to learn. And so when I discovered that world, I learned how to sew. I didn't know before that.
And that's when you got into this.
And that's when I got into it and started seeing the opportunities available to connect more people with these digital patterns.
Yeah, and to give you an idea, you have customers in all 50 states. And how many countries now?
80.
80 countries that have bought these patterns already online. And the biggest restriction, if you are the person that has been doing patterns, tell them about being a pattern provider back in the
Yeah.
What does it mean to have to deal with this if you're a pattern maker? What's your garage look like?
Oh yeah, okay. So for indie designers like me, I've published 8 of my own patterns. So the one I just showed you on the iPad is one of my designs. And right now, if I want mass distribution into a store and I want a lot of people to be able to buy my patterns, I have to make them look like this. So I go to a printer who tells me the format that I need to have my patterns in. I recreate everything about my pattern so it fits on the paper, right? They print it at a cost that I have to incur. And then I get, a minimum order of several hundreds to a couple thousand of these that I have to receive, fold and stuff them if I'm not wanting to pay that myself, and store them in my garage and wait for a distributor to call me and buy them at 70% of wholesale. Okay, so the margins for indie designers really shrink, and they're making on average about 10% on the retail cost of their patterns.
What is the retail cost of a pattern?
Our average is $10.
So they might make $1.
So they'll make $1 a piece. Okay. And so the digital side is really appealing then, of course, for designers, because you can put a PDF pattern on your website, sell the downloads of that, and your margins are so much better. But you don't have the distribution that you have through brick and mortar stores. So what Upcraft Club is doing is living in this in-between space between the brick and mortar store and the website. And we facilitate transactions between them, helping both sides. It's really a win-win-win.
So how do I know if the pattern's any good?
So,
I'm setting her up. I'm
yeah. He knows. Yes. Well, when you buy one of these established company patterns, you know that they have a certain quality to them, right? Because there's only 3 companies really that make them. They have in-house designers, and for the most part, they're going to work for you. That's not true in the independent design market, because anyone with a computer in their home can create a pattern and publish it. And literally, if you go to some of the websites now, like in Etsy, and you just type in digital sewing pattern, there will be over 100,000 sewing patterns that you'll discover. Okay? Not all of those are quality and worth the money. So what we did really early on in the company was create and publish the first set of standards for sewing patterns. So we just have this simple list that we published on our website, you can go and see it today, of all of the basic necessities that a sewing pattern should have in order to really be worth the cost, and to not frustrate our customers when they sew it. So we put our little stamp of approval on these patterns and stand behind the quality of the work. Independent designers now are really starting to recognize that. And what's exciting to me is I get emails now pretty regularly from new designers coming into the market saying, I used your standards as my checklist to make sure I included everything I needed in my pattern. And that's exactly what we want to do, is kind of raise the game for everybody.
But it also means that you have a brand now that is seen as the validation of the standard.
Yeah, yes.
And you own that.
And we own that. And I will say it hasn't always been smooth in this regard. So
startups are never smooth.
No, well, yeah, that's really true. So early on, we launched January 21st of 2015. And so in February was the first time that we really publicized on social media the fact that we had this set of standards. And the initial reaction was not all positive, to kind of say the least, I guess. Some of the designers initially felt like there was government regulation coming in and telling them how their patterns had to be set out, right? And that's not at all what we were trying to do. We weren't trying to mandate anything. We were just trying to show our customer, who's usually a beginner sewer or advanced beginner sewer, how to find the best quality patterns and find ones that they could trust. So the designers had a little bit of a pushback. We were charging for certification at that point, and so some established designers that had 30 patterns, it was going to be quite a lot of money if they wanted to have all of those done. So on social media, there was some initial pushback. And there was about 4 days in particular in February that were kind of long, seeing people commenting about this and their thoughts. It was designers, it was customers saying, do we need certification? And this whole conversation opened up. And in 4 days, I got to see every objection that anybody would ever have, from a designer to wanting their pattern certified, to a customer of why they would or wouldn't love this. And I also had members and users flocking to the site. So within that first month after we launched, we had 2,000 registered users on the site, and a lot of it came because of all this social media craziness, people talking about it, which happened to turn out to be a fantastic thing for the company and really helped us.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing to think about. Here you take a situation where you think for a minute, oh my gosh, I've just died. I mean, I'm dead. These people are going to kill me. Social media, they're ranting, the haters. My son teaches me all these terms. He's 18, web terms for all the ways someone can hate someone on the web. But you were able to basically harvest that and turn it into, for every not so happy person, a whole bunch of people said, wow, that's a cool idea.
Right. And they'd been waiting for it. They'd been waiting for this quality control to happen in an industry where there was just none of that. So.
Well, and as a middle person, also, if I buy a pattern from your site and I'm not happy for it, with it, you'll take care of me.
I refund you.
And that's the big thing, is because at the end of the day, if you're buying a pattern, you really don't know if you'd ever see your money again. So it's an interesting case where the web becomes an intermediary because there was no intermediary.
Right.
So what are the traditional, Butterwick patterns or whoever this is?
Yeah.
What do they think of all this?
They, there's an interesting history there. So it's kind of like car companies, sewing companies a little bit, where you have a couple major brands and then they own a lot of little other brands. So Butterick is actually owned by a company called McCall's Patterns, and then there's Simplicity Patterns, which you've probably heard of too, and then one out of Europe called Berta. Those are kind of the three major ones. And for the most part, they do not have digital patterns currently. And there is an older website in the early 2000s. There was a gentleman that got a patent on taking these large format patterns, because if I unfolded this for you, you'd see this massive piece of paper. Okay, they're just these huge pieces of paper that these are printed on. So we would take those and with a software program, rip them down into printable pages, so 8.5 by 11 pages. So this patent was issued then in the early 2000s, and this gentleman created a software program that you install on your computer and you can purchase a pattern. So companies like these big companies have a few patterns available in digital format like this. So I would go on my computer and download the software program and it lets me print it, but I can't view it on my iPad, I can't view it on my phone. It's just really a lot of older technology.
Well, don't you think they just replaced what was already? They just moved. It was the classic. I'm old enough that a lot of the computerization I was involved with was going from a manual paper to the first computer. And the first thing you say is, well, I'll just reproduce the system, which is the worst thing you can do. Because computers aren't people and people aren't computers, so you don't worry. So all they really did was reproduce it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so those are still available from their website today. You can find a very limited selection of them. However, because now the PDFs are the way that the patterns are being distributed, there are just so many different things you can do with that, like the color images in them. So pretty much when you're purchasing one of these digitally, you're downloading the software program and you're getting exactly what's in this envelope. You're not getting anything that walks you through the sewing process. You can't have videos embedded in them. You can't print it multiple times from your device. You can't see it on your iPads. So all these limitations. So these companies right now do not have anything like what we have. And I've talked to them at trade shows. I was at the largest industry trade show recently and talked with them. They're really excited about the possibilities of working with a company like Upcraft Club, which I hope is exactly what happens. Yeah. And we take their patterns and make them much more accessible to people now. Because there's a survey that was done recently that showed only 16% of sewists actually prefer the paper version. Okay. Then you have some people who are neutral. They'll sew with whatever as long as it is the design they want to actually make. And then a growing percentage of people who prefer the digital.
Is sewing growing or shrinking?
Yeah, it's
and
growing.
Who's growing? Who is it?
Growing. Yeah, overall since 2008, sewing as a market has grown 7.5% a year. And by 2020, it's estimated that there will be 30 million sewing machines sold every year around the world.
That's a lot of machines.
It's a lot.
And it's, from what you've told me, it's a lot of young people.
Yeah.
And they're getting into it as, and not my grandmother's, I don't have any money. It's younger people saying this is fun, it's a hobby, it's a cool hobby, and I get to actually get something out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, our average customer's in their early 40s.
Nice.
And our members right now range in age from 21 to 71. So, I mean, it's a wide range of people that are wanting to sew, and they're using these digital patterns. And if you think about it, a sewing machine is basically a computer now, right? I mean, it's a piece of technology that people are buying. So there's this stigma with sewing that it's, old ladies with all gray hair, bun on top, surrounded by cats sitting there
sewing
something.
She has a picture like this in her deck. It's really good.
But that's not at all what it is at all now.
Yeah. Well, so you've gone down through, and I've kind of been through a little bit of this with you, but tell us about growing the company. What's that been like? I mean, how have you done it? How many employees do you have? How big are you?
Oh, yeah. I have no employees. I have me, which is a challenge, of course, to be the only one. But I have a team of 30 contractors that work with us right now, and they're like content creators, bloggers, and they get paid for every post that they create. They're writing great sewing tutorials, or they take some of our website patterns and they will create beautiful things out of them to show people what's possible, what you can make. So that's great. And it's been a process of just growing that, refining, the path to continue to grow. It can't be me much longer.
Yeah, at some point you're going to have to get some help.
I have to get some help.
Yeah. Well,
so working on that now.
And you do have a family.
And I have a family. My husband is here. We have 4 children. And this is the first year that all of them are in school. So this is a really good time for things to start scaling for me.
So where are you going next? What's next for you? What are you going to be doing over the next 6 months?
Yeah, so one thing that I didn't talk too much about yet is how we actually sell the patterns in the store. So our actual product looks like this. So you've got the old-fashioned paper, right? You've got the digital that I showed you. But what we do is we put these into stores. So in 2016, this is really our push, is to get this into as many stores as possible. We have a waiting list right now of stores that want this. And this little card is how they facilitate the digital sale. So on the back, it shows all the traditional things you would need. If you're going to sew something, you need to know how much fabric you need for it, right? Well, stores love this because this is the supply list. And you go into your local shop and you buy everything off of the back of this card so you can make whatever's on the front, right? And then there's a unique URL on them, and this is how we track and compensate the store for all the sales that come through them.
And the good news is it's human readable. So the URL is Upcraft Club / the name of the company, the store, Stitch DSM in this case, / picnic skirt. So you can actually type this in versus / $, 47 hex 35, right?
Yeah.
So they are in Stitch.
They're in Stitch here in the East Village. This is an example of a card that they have. So if you want to check it out, or you like to sew, or you know people, sure, oh yeah, or you know people who like to sew, tell them to go check it out. So the immediate plan is to get into many more stores so that we can get good metrics and best practices of how it can best be displayed. I mean, there's just a lot of question marks around that side of things, and then open it up.
And without getting into numbers, her sales are growing substantially. In fact, I did some modeling on some of her data, and it's taken off.
It's taken off.
Cruising right along.
Yeah.
So let's open it up for questions for Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, when you said 80 countries, I was like,
Yeah.
international.
Yeah.
My question, of course, goes to, I am Hispanic, and what are you doing in Latin America or the Hispanic market?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with our patterns, all of our patterns are in English right now. So as long as someone can read English, they can use them, or look through the pictures, because these pictures really show you every single step along the way. So we find that international markets, it's pretty easy for anyone to pick up one of our patterns. As we continue to grow, we would love to be able to have different languages available. Yes, and that would be great. But one other thing I'll mention as far as the international piece goes, and the reason why we can sell in all these other countries, is because we make sure that our patterns are compatible with regular letter paper in the US, so you can print it out of your printer, and A4 paper, which is the standard in Europe and Australia. And so anywhere in the world, you should be able to print these patterns. So.
Well, don't you think they'll become more like, if any of you have children who have built Legos, the instructions have almost no words in them.
Yeah.
For the obvious reason that they work everywhere. And I think about all the visuals, the pictures, the videos, and everything else, you're eliminating the need for all the language. Not all of it, but some of it at least.
Right.
Kurt, you had a question.
Yeah.
For your layout, I'm really interested in how you got that workflow. So was the workflow taken from your experience, or is the workflow taken from what you saw those old concepts?
The workflow within a pattern itself, or of my organization and how it works?
The pattern itself. So from this is what I'm going to make, what I need to do next, and then where do I see my cut, where are my cuts? So how do you come up with that?
Yes, that is a great question. So there's a lot of technicality to sewing. So you can go to school for years to learn all the nuances of construction of garments or quilts or whatever it is that you're creating, how they should actually go together, how to draft them and grade them properly so they actually fit people, right? This is a skill. Very early on in developing my first pattern, which my first pattern was an apron, it was a rectangle. Okay, really easy, it ties in the back so it could fit anyone, this is easy way to start. But as I got into more fitted clothing especially, I realized that was way over my head personally. to know how to do that. I have not gone to school to learn sewing, drafting, grading, all of that. So I lean on experts for that. So I have people who grade and draft the patterns, and that's all they do, and they use great, fantastic, expensive CAD programs that do it beautifully. And then the construction techniques, these people also will tell you which techniques need to go into each garment, which is very helpful.
Is some of that up to each individual pattern designer? So if I'm a pattern designer, don't I set that in my pattern?
Yeah. Yes, it is up to each individual one. There are a lot of indie pattern makers who are now stay-at-home moms, but perhaps in the past have worked for different, garment makers, or they've worked in some of the fashion houses. So they really are experts. So they really are experts. They can absolutely do all of their own.
So really the standards for making these products and the patterns, you haven't changed any of that per se. You're just moving it.
Yeah.
Well, and you're not moving yourself, you're creating the marketplace.
Right.
And that's, I think, the key thing to know is she didn't create the ability or the technicalities of it. She just said, let's get all these indie pattern makers to meet all these people who sew, which are now called sewists.
Sewists.
I used to know it as seamstress, but I think that's rather dated, but sewist.
Yes. There still are people who identify as seamstress for sure, but
My
kind of the
would.
modern term we use is sewist, because if you write sewer, and you write it, it looks like sewer.
Yeah,
right?
It does look a little bit like
sewer. So that's why we don't.
All right, we got a whole bunch of questions. You had one back there. Somebody back there had one.
Yeah.
Is there a pattern for the new pattern? In other words, if I bought two different patterns from two different producers, would they look the same or are they different?
For indie designers, they are quite different, and which is a really nice thing, because some people like, for example, when you're looking at a pattern online, you might want to use your iPad. I personally sew with my iPad sitting next to me, so it's actually nice to have them horizontally displayed. But then there are others who vertically display theirs, and it's all personal preference. You get to know which designers do it which ways. And what we want to be able to do is tell people before they purchase the pattern what it looks like on the inside, so they know what they're getting.
Hey, yeah, there's about 6. So let's go over here and then back over here.
Just a question on how do you protect, protect the pattern? So if someone bought that, downloaded it, so why do you do that?
That is a great question. So we do as much security as we can on the patterns. When someone purchases one, we stamp every page of the PDF automatically with their email address and the date they purchased it, to really discourage sharing, because we know exactly who shares it if they do. And there's not a lot that we can do past that, but that's okay. It's kind of like what's happened with books and with audiobooks or anything like that you could buy. People try to resell them every once in a while, and some of that, I call it bless and release, like some of that's going to happen, so just don't stress about it. But we do what we can to keep them secure.
Yeah,
as far as, go ahead.
You go ahead.
I was going to say something different. So
I think just because the PDF was established by these indies, and that's the way they did things, you have the restriction of what you can do, but by watermarking all the pages, you at least are, from a legality standpoint, if you sell one pattern once, nobody really cares, but if I go in the business of reselling every pattern and sell many, many copies, she can at least fight me in court correctly and say, in most countries, stop, and you can get the cease. So,
yeah.
You had a question, Katie?
I took sewing in high school. I actually made my prom dress.
Wow.
But I'm a digital dinosaur, so I'm having trouble. So this young lady here has an A-line dress. In the old days, you took out all that tissue paper, then you get your fabric on the seam, and you would lay that big piece of fabric there. So when you have 8.5 by 11, do you get like 8 of those?
Yes.
You piece those together?
You piece them together.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the beautiful part of that is, so you can have a woman's pattern or a men's pattern is going to be pretty big, right? Like if you're doing a pair of pants, it's going to be as long as the body actually is, right? But what's beautiful about the PDF patterns is they can be layered. So if you're familiar with PDFs, there's layered files that you can create. And what that allows you to do is print just the size and just the pattern pieces that you actually need. So if I'm making a top and I want to make it sleeveless, I don't have to print out this long sleeve page. I can just have what I need, which wastes a lot less, paper. So.
Yeah, if you think about it, for these indie designers, they're basically going from holding many, many thousands of dollars worth of paper to maybe earn 10% on their investment. or 10% on their sales is saying, I basically have to create a PDF and make it available for distribution, and I make anywhere from, well, what do they make? What's the return for the average? I know
Yeah.
it varies, but.
Yeah, it varies. So if you sell it on your own website, all you have is your website costs and you keep the entire amount.
Right.
So you're basically making 100% of the cost. When they sell with me, it's kind of an industry standard of about 50% that they keep and 50% goes to the site. And that's for the security piece, for the distribution piece. I pay all of the payment processing fees
Credit card
and
fees.
all of that.
Yeah.
So.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, can you
Yeah.
tell the group, I know the answer to this, but I think it's always an interesting story, as to why you even started doing this? What made you
Yeah.
start to do this? I think it's like everybody has a reason for doing this, and it's not because you were
Yeah.
this great seamstress or something.
No. Oh no. Right. So the reason I got into sewing, is that what you're talking about? Like with, and to get into this.
thing going.
Yeah. So I'll talk about sewing really quick and then how the company came about. I took one class in high school where I learned how to sew something, and it didn't make me all want to do it, as a hobby and really jump into it. I later on, after I had our first daughter, I saw this little pair of bloomers in a magazine, these little shorts, for my newborn. And I had this, newborns don't stay in one size very long, like a week.
Right.
Okay. So these little bloomers were $100.
The Gap baby loves that. The Gap baby loves the fact that
do.
nothing, yeah.
That's right. So these bloomers were $100
Oh, jeez.
for my newborn baby girl. I really wanted them. But I realized that was crazy. $100 for something they'll wear for a week. So I thought, there's got to be a way to make this. It doesn't look that hard. Bloomers are a rectangle with some elastic on the bottom. I mean, they're very, very simple. So I went to a store and I found a paper pattern like this. And I opened it up thinking, I'm going to know how to sew because my husband had a sewing machine. Which I did not. I didn't know how to thread it, but he had one. And I couldn't figure out the pattern. I couldn't figure out how to sew it. I had no idea what they were talking about. I should have brought those bloomers the first try that I made because they would not fit anybody. They looked horrible. So I ended up hiring a sewing teacher and learning how to make these actual bloomers. Got them done when she was about 8 months old. It took a really long time. And they were probably the most expensive garment that I've ever made because it took me so many tries and I wasted so much fabric and all of that. But it was a good learning experience. Well, after that, I discovered this world of digital sewing patterns. And I tried again, and I made a dress. And I could do it by myself with no help from the sewing teacher. Yeah. And realized what a game changer that was. Then I discovered sewing blogs and how many there were out there. And I had a blog at the time just about family stuff. And so I started sewing things and putting pictures up of my kids wearing these things that I sewed. And people started commenting on them and liking them. And I started getting people engaging with them online about the things I was sewing, which was kind of cool. And eventually, I started blogging for a really well-known sewing blog. And I would just do some guest posting for her. And people started asking for patterns of the stuff that I made. And I thought, I don't know how to make a pattern. So I started with this apron pattern to see how to lay it out, like how does Adobe Illustrator work, and just learned step by step by step. And now, like I said, I've published 8 patterns and just saw this need to connect people with the digital goods. And especially the brick and mortar stores who are missing out on these sales and watching customers go around them. To get digital goods, how do they connect their customers? So it all just started kind of coming together, and yeah.
How did you go about getting your first indie pattern designers to buy into the concept?
They were my friends. So what's really nice about it, since I'm a designer, I've built everything to be friendly to the designers. And my goal is for them to keep more money in their pocket. And they know that. And I'm a friend to them and really want to continue being a friend to them as we grow. And so I started just asking my friends. And I started with 4 patterns on the site. There were 4 when we first launched. and it just grew and grew and grew.
Yeah, I got to say, I get people who will come to me with a business idea in a space that they've never done business in before, and they say, they ask for advice, and I say, go be part of that business. Kurt, if you want to do a restaurant, then you better go work for a restaurant for a while and see if you like being in a restaurant and enjoy doing restaurant work, because it isn't what you think it is. And so if you set out to go after this industry and you said, that's what I'm going to do, you would start sewing, you would make a pattern, you would start talking to the social media world, you would build friendships, all to learn it. So you basically did what, I don't know if you planned it that well, but you did exactly what many of us would tell you to do, and that is embed yourself in that community and really understand it.
Yeah.
Because it isn't about putting a website up, it's about getting people to love what you do and interact and give you feedback, good and bad, about what is right and what's wrong.
And the first website iteration that I had is about the time when we met.
Right.
And at that time I was thinking I would put kiosks in all of the stores.
Yes, you were going to put printers everywhere.
Where you could print out the patterns right there in the store. And I started doing customer discovery around this. I had gone through venture school, and I'm a big fan of venture school. I had talked to hundreds of customers about what is it that you love about digital patterns, what don't you like, how do you find them, and the pain points around that as I was crafting this website. And that's when we met, and I think you were the first one to say, that's a terrible idea.
Well, I don't know if I said it was terrible, but I worked for a company that put a lot of technology inside retail stores. And I can't begin to tell you all the amazingly stupid things employees do to technology inside of retail stores, especially if they've been drinking, smoking, huffing, whatever it is they do. I just can't tell you all the things. Pouring water inside of computers is one of the favorites. Bubble gum inside of printers, that's a fave. So anyway, when she was talking about this, I'm like, it's really, really, really hard to keep those things working, and when they break, the employees just kind of walk away from them and then they're broken. So
and there's Wi-Fi issues, and there's all kinds of reasons why that was difficult.
It may be easier to try it in New York City, right?
But what's nice is when I show this pattern card to store owners now today, they don't care about having a kiosk. Their customers don't care about having a kiosk. I mean, it was just a really good thing. Their eyes get about this big, and they say, when can I have that in my store? Because this meets the need to facilitate that sale for them.
And they get a piece of the action. The store gets a piece
of the action,
Yeah. Yeah, who's the first employee? There you go.
That's a good question.
They better be pretty multifaceted.
Yes. It will not be a one title, kind of a person. But really, a couple things that are important to me right now is someone who is good at working with the brand partnership. So as I'm beginning to work with the pattern companies, with the shops, someone with that good distribution eye is really, really important to me, that helps kind of sell it into the stores.
There is an existing distribution network for these, and they have amazing connections into all these little fabric stores all over the place, and that's really very valuable to someone like her. Yeah,
because the other thing I didn't really realize at the time was that distributors are also cut out of the digital sale. Distributors that sell hard goods into stores only have what they can purchase from people in their garages, right? I mean, that's all they have. And so they've been cut out of the digital sale and have been looking for a way to get into it. And they love what we're doing and are excited to give it to their customers. So we'll be doing that. Yeah.
Kurt, you had another question? Oh, sorry. Kurt, hang on. You've been trying to ask a question. I'm sorry. You've had your hand up several times. Hey,
yeah.
It's a pop. Yeah. I'm sorry. Throw something. It works.
Yeah.
And more than a question, there's a question and a comment. I see that you said 10 million on machines.
Yeah.
Are going to be sold.
30 million machines a year.
So I see just like a perfect partnership between you, patterns, and the companies that do these sewing machines.
Yep.
Yeah, you've talked to some of the machine people.
I have.
So maybe, I don't know if you have thought about it, like a direct mail with them, because they do have already the clients.
Well, the question is, how do you tie in with the sewing machine manufacturers? And maybe you can take that, because I think you've talked to them a little bit.
Yes, it's a great idea. So I love your thinking. Yes, so over the years, what has happened is you have some partnerships that have developed with sewing machine companies and these paper pattern companies. And every once in a while, there will be like a promotion, for example, where you buy a new sewing machine and it comes with like 3 patterns in it. Okay? The problem with that is, what if I bought my sewing machine to make quilts and it's 3 garment patterns that they give me? That's not useful to me, right? So what our technology allows is for anybody to just choose a pattern that they like. If you like bags or quilts or toys or garments or whatever it is, you can choose. And so yes, we've definitely talked to the sewing machine companies about how do we package some of our digital products that work so naturally with their
So
machines.
it's kind of like a gift card. You can have a gift card and buy whatever patterns you want versus whatever you got stuffed in the box.
Yep.
Yeah.
Seems so natural.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, it does.
I have one question here.
He's pulling up his pattern.
You have to speak up, Kurt. We can't hear you.
Yeah, so you talked about establishing, working through the objections in the first run.
Yeah.
From the seamsters, am I getting that right?
Sewists.
Sewists.
So
Yeah.
Sound like Teamsters.
Yeah.
It's in now. So, how did you establish quality control? Because you have a lot of
Yeah.
data coming through, you have a lot of patterns coming through. It's
Yeah.
kind of like you're one person.
Yes.
I'm just saying that's hard. How,
It is. Yes, so how do we have the quality control? I have a team of people that sew the patterns, and they actually go through the checklist. Now, right now, it's this kind of chicken or egg problem, right, where you want a lot of patterns because we have memberships that people pay monthly for, and they want a new pattern every single month with their membership cost, okay? So we need to provide new patterns to them all the time so they have more selection to choose from. But there's only so fast that we can sew all the patterns. So we have been trying to work out that balance, I guess. That's a continual problem, is how do you scale up the certification team. So not all of the patterns that you see today actually have our certification seal yet, but we do not allow them in there until we've seen the pattern, know their reviews, and then our teams work through them as they can. So yeah, it's a good question.
So you talked about having videos within the pattern specifically, or to teach you different techniques.
Yeah.
And I could see, a lot of, I've sewn a few things before, but I've tried a pattern once and threw it out the window.
Yeah.
I got everything cut and just never sewed it together.
Yeah.
And, so do you have like classes, to attract these beginning sewers, or is that, I see that being a way of, capturing an audience before they know what they want, or know to look for a digital pattern?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have tried a couple little digital classes right at the beginning to see what people really liked. And there are some sites now that have really good selection of beginning sewer classes, or how do you install a zipper, or how do you do all of these different things. So we've kind of stepped out of pushing classes right now. We provide the great patterns, and we're happy to connect people with the tutorials that they can find. But what's cool about it is the videos that I've mentioned about being embedded in a pattern, those come from the designers themselves. And it just furthers their brands and their personality, and it gets people more connected to them and wanting to buy their next pattern when they introduce it.
Yeah, and I think
You can get to know them through
it
video.
is kind of interesting is that now the personality of the pattern maker comes through. So you may find that amongst all the people that design women's clothing, there's 3 or 4 that you really like the way they do things. You like to sew the way they sew. You like the styles they design. Well, this kind of stuff tends to take all that personal style out because there's all these standards they've got to, it's, I don't want to unwrap this, but it's got to fit on a piece of tissue paper.
Right.
And now the pattern maker can be whatever they want it to be and add as much as they want. I think that's kind of nice because it'll personalize it.
Yeah.
And to the language thing, there's nothing stopping them from selling a pattern that is multilingual. For example,
Yeah.
there's nothing, especially if it's a pattern that makes sense in a certain culture, I would certainly think they would do it in that language.
Yeah.
So it's more of how well known you are around the world, although 80 countries is pretty good in the
80
first year.
countries.
I mean, keep in mind the site's been up less than a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thinking about that, things happen fairly quickly. I know
Yeah.
there's a ton of life experience that went into bringing you to
Yeah.
that. When you think about future forward and you think about the aspirations for it, what do you put out there as, how far you go, and what do you put out there as, this is a milestone?
That's a great question. I've got a big vision for the company. we're going in some exciting places, and really it's all about the connection of the digital good with the consumer where they are. So a lot of that is in that brick and mortar store, and this works for more than sewing. So sewing is a really good place because of my background for that to happen, but think about the adjacent crafting markets even, Jess. Like Stitch in Des Moines we talked about earlier, you can go and you can get our sewing patterns there. They sell knitting there. You can buy beautiful yarn and knitting needles and all of that. So knitting patterns, crocheting patterns, digital scrapbooking, like anything within this crafty sphere. Typically when you find someone who loves one of the needle arts, they are also into several other things, right? And so the sky's kind of the limit.
Well, to give you an idea, there was a company that you sent me the link. I think you sent it to me, right?
No,
Tage.
yeah.
Tage sends me this link because he watches all the Angel and VC stuff going on. And there's a company, do you remember the name of it? Lovecrafts, that's into knitting. And they just raised their second round. They raised another $20 million.
Yeah.
But here's the problem. First of all, it's stupid. Okay, first of all, that's just dumb. There's no reason to put $20 million in. I don't know what they'd ever do with it.
Hey,
but,
I would. No.
I could see you using up the first million or two, but come on, 20? But the point is, they're all one of the things I see is they're all trying to control the entire experience. They don't want the bricks and mortar store to succeed.
Yeah.
Well, you tell me, but every time I buy a piece of clothing, I do this. I want to touch it. I want to feel it. I want to go I want to know what that feels like. And so the idea that you're going to instantly get some knitting person who's really good at this and loves it, because that's the person you want, someone that knits every week, to give up touching anything until after it shows up, I really question that.
Yeah.
And they're very much putting, rather than just bringing a market together, I think about what eBay did. You go back to the mid-90s when eBay came around, they didn't tell everybody how to do it. They just facilitated it. Really. And they did not say, you must sell this, you must sell that, you can't sell this, you can sell that. They just was a facilitation. So I will be surprised if those, and there's a few others that have raised that kind of money too.
Right, there's one that's raised $106 million that's in the crafting and sewing kind of sphere. And there's these companies that are doing that are trying to replace the store.
Right.
And that's not at all what we're trying to do. We actually are adding value to the store. You can go into your store. We support them. They already have amazing customers.
Right.
I don't want to replace that. I want to add value to what they can offer to their customers.
Well, and a lot of the money they're raising is simply to buy inventory. And that's kind of a crazy reason to raise money is to buy inventory.
Yeah, so Craftsy has digital sewing patterns in it as well, but they really focus on classes, and now they do the supplies. So they're one that is looking to kind of almost replace the store. You can buy your fabric, you can buy their own brand of yarn, you can buy all of that through them. So we really want to make it a win-win for everybody. The designers win because they keep more money in their pocket. The stores win because they get their customers coming and spending the money with them instead of online. And we win because we're facilitating it all. Yeah.
Will your model be dependent on the stores, or will you be doing other things?
Yeah, it's not.
Some of those stores are suffering and there's
Sure. And they're suffering because they haven't had a way to solve this problem to a large extent. But no, we're not dependent on stores because right now we have been mostly online. So from the beginning of the company, we're just online e-commerce marketplace. Anybody from the world could come and find us and get a pattern. But the partnership with stores is really powerful.
Yeah, think about this for a minute. You go into a store, you find one pattern card, and you're on vacation, and you never go back to that stage again. But you've got the card. Guess where you end up? You end up on her website. Well, they have a membership. You can sign up. You can go back. She gets your email address when you buy that one. So in a lot of ways, it lets the consumer say, I can choose either one or both. And if I like my local, Stitch DSM, I'm going to keep going in there. Even if I bought the pattern online, honestly, whether they lose the $2 on the pattern, they don't care. If you keep coming back in to buy all the fabric from them, the last $2 isn't it. It's just they're just not going to do it for free, right?
Yeah. And sewing is in a lot of retailers that people often don't think. So in my pitch, I have a picture of the West Des Moines Walmart.
Right.
And Walmart has more of its store dedicated to sewing, fabric and all of that, than it does to chips, cookies, and crackers combined.
Think about that.
Huge square footage. Target sells sewing, and then there's the traditional retailers that you think about, like Joann Fabrics and Hancock Fabrics, Michaels, and so on, that deal in the crafting industry. And so it's independent shops and it's big box shops. They all have the same problem, and we can solve it for them.
And the interesting thing is it doesn't hurt the independent shop if Joanne's fabric ends up with some of these cards as well, or vice versa. It doesn't hurt them. They're still competing for the same on-the-ground customer, and if they're just both have more patterns. So I think it's why I'm obviously you can tell I'm very high on this, but she's not creating barriers in the marketplace for the end customer. She's taking them out for the distribution for everybody.
Yeah,
the barriers
for
going
everybody.
down. Whereas I look at that one that just raised 20 million and say all you're doing is building barriers with that money.
Yeah.
You're basically saying don't do.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing that I think is worth mentioning is when a store buys a paper pattern to put on their shelf, they have a wholesale cost that's sunk into this. Okay, especially the independents, because they're buying them outright at a wholesale cost. With our card, there's nothing or very little, I mean a couple cents, right, that's invested in that. And so they can carry a broader range of patterns so that their customers coming in can discover more and can buy more from them, buy more of their tools, buy
And
more
if you've ever
patterns.
been in a sewing store and you see these huge drawers and systems for holding onto these things, because they're fairly big and thick, you can just leave the cards scattered around. It doesn't require the real estate.
Just gotta go make sure that there was the pattern that somebody pulled out gets put back.
Well, no kidding. Can you imagine the hassle for the store owners?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
How does a card work? So you just send them to the store, kind of talk me through that.
Yeah, it's this URL really is the magic behind it. So the URL includes the store's name, and we co-brand it. So like this again, a Stitch in the East Village. This is their logo. It's right here. Their website is on here. We like to promote the local shop. And then the pattern name is on here. So we track everything about it.
They don't make a purchase in the store.
Correct.
They just take that home, when they buy it, then the store gets credit.
Or on their phone.
But what they do buy is the fabric.
Right.
So again,
Yeah.
the reason this card is there is not only to show you the picture, but to say, oh, here's all the fabric I need and everything. So it's the store that's holding these as not an inventory, but just an item, and that's how the discovery happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you like the process of getting that idea and concept to the stores? Because I would imagine, I'm a creature of habit, I'm sure I have this as well. How do you get that step by step? Once you have the card or just kind of getting away from the old way of doing it?
Yeah, so the distributor is a really good partner with me in talking to the stores. We're creating marketing materials and materials on how to train the store staff and how these work, because they're having one-on-one relationships with the customers then. And some point of purchase things and all that goes into a strategy like this is what is being developed now.
Yeah.
The just thing is, you're
Yeah.
talking about that would be possible, this is just a comment.
Yeah.
Because as you're making stores, you're pushing them in there, where they can come up and they can print their own effect.
Yeah.
They can digital ID and they can ship it
Yep,
themselves.
absolutely.
And you can print it out with their store.
That's what she's setting up right now, is so if you are a store or distributor, you can just reach out to a printer
It seems like that.
and have them made.
They can print, you push up the printing cost too, right? So
Right.
you're not
Yep.
distribution or printing.
Exactly.
Yep. And they can even print a QR code and they can just post it next to a picture that they have, and they don't
Yeah.
even have to deal
They
with
don't have
cards.
to deal with it.
So yes, we're working on all those things to make it really a no-brainer for stores to be able to carry the patterns. And
And if you think about people with their phones these days, you could be standing in the store, scan the QR and say, buy now. And you own the pattern. It's done.
yeah, and I should say when you go to a URL on here, and I encourage everyone to try it,
Yes,
and buy
please.
one if you
Buy
want
one,
to.
buy one.
But it goes directly to the cart. So you see all the details about the pattern here. You're making your decision to buy it at this point. So once you have it in your cart, you simply click one PayPal button or put in your credit card and you're done. And it's emailed to you. So,
Bernard.
Does it make sense if somebody is familiar with your product, your standard, likes what you do, and they want to buy a different pattern, and they already trust what they're getting, does it make sense for them to be able to buy the material from your site?
buy the material. That is a great question. It seems like a natural thing, but what I don't want to do is ever compete with the store, because I'm relying on them for distribution. So I would send them to their local shop. Or, there's other online places
There
where
are
you can
lots
buy
of online
fabric.
fabrics areas, and again, I think a lot of those are struggling because, again, you want to know what it feels like. You want to know how thick it is. It's really hard to just describe that online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this weekend, the only sewing I've ever done basically is sewing my leaf bag and my mulcher this weekend.
Nice.
So I
Yay.
cannot sew. So I would come to your site and you say, I want to sew, but I know nothing. You took a class, I don't want to take a class.
Yeah.
Are there patterns? Do I have to be a member?
Nope.
I've been out to your site, but I
Yeah.
haven't done through your website.
Yeah.
So do I have to be a member? Can I buy it? Are there patterns for people who only know what I've
Yes.
read on needle?
Yep, there are beginner patterns, and just like what I did when I made that first dress with a pattern that walked me through step by step, you could do that. So there are beginner labels on the patterns that would be perfect for you.
And there is no requirement for a membership. Anybody can go buy
Right.
one pattern and that's it.
Yes. It's a better deal if you're a member.
Yeah.
And you also have me for support. I mean, when people email, remember, it's just me. They get directly to me. I get phone calls every once in a while because on the credit card statements, my phone number is on there.
Oh boy.
And so I'm happy. I answer my phone. Like, I'll talk to people. I'll help them through a step if they need it. You can, tweet me or ask me a question on Facebook. I answer it for people all the time about how to sew something.
We have time for one more question.
So what is your best seller? What type of project? And what do you see working on next? What project? What type of project?
Good question. So our best sellers currently right now are some women's patterns. So people sewing for themselves, especially as the seasons turn. That is the biggest seller. The most requested thing we have is quilt patterns. And so we're really working on, that's the next thing, is to beef up the number of quilt patterns that we have. So, yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay, sneak one more in. It was quick.
Just telling me I have a very good quilting.
Ooh, good.
There we go.
Ooh, I love it.
All right. Elizabeth, can you stick around for a couple minutes?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.